Welcome to today's session. My name's David Savage. Thanks for tuning in if you are. This is a session all about being an entrepreneur in COVID-19 times. And we're going to have, first of all, a presentation by Chitra Stern, and then myself and Chitra will have a chat pertaining to some of the information in that. Just as a way of introduction, before I hand over to Chitra, she is the recipient of a prestigious Deloitte Institute Accomplished Entrepreneur Award at the London Business School. Person of the Year, awarded by the International Family Travel Association and the Family Traveller Award for special contribution to family travel market. She's also an electronic engineer, chartered accountant, and MBA from the London Business School. Between 2017 and 2019, Chitra was on the committee of Portugal In, a special task force created by the Portuguese Prime Minister's office to further enhance foreign direct investment into Portugal. She's also an invited professor for luxury marketing at the Nova Business School of Economics and the incoming president of the Entrepreneurs Organization in Portugal. On top of that, she's the owner and founding board member of, and I'm probably going to mispronounce this, so apologies, the Martin Hall Family Hotel and Resorts. She's a passionate entrepreneur of real estate and hotel development, working alongside her business partner and husband, which might be an interesting dynamic, Roman. And that's on projects across Portugal. So as you can see, a fantastic background and someone that we're truly lucky to be joined by for this particular session. So enough of me rabbiting on. We'll hand over to the presentation from Chitra. And as I said, there'll be some questions afterwards.
Thank you so much, David, for this amazing introduction. And hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Well, it's afternoon here, and looking forward to the session. So I'm going to start sharing the screen and going to my PowerPoint presentation. Just might take a few seconds. Just give me a second, and there we are. I'm going to, so I put a short presentation together to explain what we've been doing as entrepreneurs. And so I'll just run through this quickly, and then we'll get to the fireside chat with David. My husband and I came to Portugal in 2001, and we started a real estate business here. He is Swiss, I'm Singaporean originally, but I'm British and lived in London for 12 years, and we moved from London to the Algarve in Portugal. We have developed 4 hotels in Portugal. We developed a brand from scratch called the Martinhal Hotels, which signifies luxury for the family holiday market. And we're multiple award winning, and we bring sophistication to family holidays, as I mentioned earlier. So here you see some pictures that bring together the meaning of upmarket family holidays. So here, this map shows the locations of our hotels. We have 2 in the Algarve now. We started with the one in the extreme left-hand corner of Portugal, Sagres, and since then we've expanded to Quinta do Lago, Cascais, Chiado, and we're having a 5th one being built in the Park of Nations in Lisbon. We've got, these are just imagery, these are images which show what our hotels are about, to give you an impression. This one is the Martinhal Sagres Hotel and Resort right at the beach. We have various kids facilities around. The restaurants are gorgeous. We've got plenty of playgrounds around, and yet we are sophisticated for the parents. And those who have children will understand this, how difficult it is to find sophistication while on holiday with the kids, where they get what they need as well. So we concentrate on fresh food. We also do great activities in all our resorts, depending on our location. This picture shows the Martinhal Cascais Family Hotel, which is in Greater Lisbon. In fact, Cascais, this particular area, Quinta da Marinha, is what I call the Beverly Hills of Lisbon. I consider Portugal to be the California of Europe. And I've been saying that since 2002, because that was what came to mind for me when I first visited Portugal. So this is in Quinta do Lago. It has several houses, and each one of them has a private garden pool, but still set in the middle of 4 amazing golf courses and still close to the sea. This is our city center product in Chiado. Now, when I was having a conversation with David about his trips to Lisbon, he was talking about wandering through the heart of Príncipe Real and Baixa Chiado, and this is right in the heart of that very trendy area. And we made this apt for families traveling to city centers and right in the heart of Lisbon, and still family friendly, as I said. Our 5th project now, the Branded Hotel Residences project in Lisbon, will open in 2022. It's in construction right now, and it's in the trendy Park of Nations area. Those who've been to Lisbon and to Web Summit know this area extremely well, because this is where Web Summit sort of happens here, and further north to that huge arena here, and the evening sunset parties happen in this building here called the Pavilion of Portugal. So, and you see the lines of the cable car here. So the Park of Nations area, exactly where Web Summit happens, is where our next projects are being built. I say projects because you'll see in a minute. Apart from this Branded Hotel Residences project, which brings luxury living with service to the Park of Nations, the people living in this building will get all the hotel services, concierge services, as well as, your router goes down, somebody will be there to fix it. We have TV stations for the residents, etc. But on the first few floors in the original picture here, we have a hotel product. So right by the Vasco da Gama Bridge. This shows another project we're working on. It's an innovative education hub, which brings together different elements of education. At its heart is an international school with co-working, co-living spaces, an academy, and gym and auditorium space. And I say education hub, first of all, because of the international school. And why an international school in this area, in the Park of Nations area? Because this area here has no international school yet. Here you see the map of other schools which are existing or opening soon or future opening. But without an international school, you don't get families moving to this area from outside of town. And this is part of foreign direct investment. If you want to attract families, executives to companies, or families to move here under resident schemes, etc., you need an international school, and that's why we're doing it. We're focusing on making it a campus community, almost like a university, but the international school will have kindergarten to grade 12 with international baccalaureate diploma for grades 11 and 12, and bringing together all these things around here, as you see. But the key thing is really that we will realize the synergies between all these different bits of it: the EdTech innovation, lifelong learning academy, but also reach out to the facilities and amenities that surround us, like the Oceanarium of Lisbon, the Teatro de Camões, which is that blue building close to the Microsoft building. Those who've been to Web Summit will know that. It's the National Ballet, the Science Museum, which is the Pavilion do Conhecimento, and the Companhia Nacional de Bailado is really in the teatro. So, there'll be drama as well as music and dance, which our students hopefully will be able to connect into, and the Oceanarium to bring them into our hub to do lessons as well. We're going to be a Microsoft showcase school, and that's a pretty key element of it. We'll be talking about it a bit later in our fireside chat. And really the motto is we're focusing on education that matters for tomorrow, even in the design and build of the school, and connecting all the various learning hubs for collaborative activities within the school as well as outside the school. So this gives you an overview of what our projects are about. So tourism, hotels, real estate, service departments, because the one in Chiado, are really service departments, but with a twist, education, offices, what happened in March here? Well, what happened to the world starting in January? Nobody needs an introduction to. But what did we face here? We saw it happening, obviously, as the news of the coronavirus spread, starting in January, although it started in China and Wuhan in December 2019. We really started hearing much more about it in January of this year, and February it continued. We all in Europe watched Italy, and my heart really goes out to the Italians and the Spaniards, our neighbors in Southern Europe, who really went through a very tough time. And March was a very stressful month. I've just put some headlines here to remind people, perhaps, of the time. These are headlines from March from the Financial Times. And things moved so rapidly, which is one of the reasons why it was so stressful. I remember the first case was announced in Portugal on the 2nd of March. And very quickly, we were, flights stopped, borders closed, schools closed down on the 16th of March, and lockdown straight after. We were supposed to have had an entrepreneurship event, our fourth Martinelli entrepreneurship event on the 18th of March, where Ayumi, president of Women in Tech, was supposed to be speaking, but we had to make the decision literally the week before to postpone the event. Governments started making announcements of COVID loans and announced the furlough to help, furlough law, temporary layoff law to help us. We had to put 260 out of our 300 permanent staff into furlough. We couldn't contract a further 300 staff in temporary positions for housekeeping, outsourced food and beverage help, waiters, waitresses. And as I said, 260 of our own permanent staff had to be put into furlough. And we had to close our 4 hotels, had to close down our admission suite for the school, close down the sales suite for real estate sales. And it was very stressful, primarily because of daily changing news and daily changing scenario planning, to say the least, and with the health scare on top of everything. So April felt quite desperate, I must say, because actually it was the 1st of April that our staff went into furlough. All the planning and organizing had to be done before. And the news continued to be bad, and it went from bad to worse in April. And I just remembered, feeling quite desperate through the month of April. And, I've got the headlines here for those of you who remember Boris Johnson going into hospital and, all the various press briefings coming out of America. We just saw the world getting into a worse and worse state. But towards the end of April, things changed for us, at least. We saw that Portugal was doing a good job in handling the pandemic. I'll mention a few more things after this. And, towards the end of April, I started doing live talks and webinars. I was getting invited to talk about what was happening, how were we reacting to it as an entrepreneur, as a female entrepreneur, as an entrepreneur in the industry of hotels and tourism. So I've done lots of Insta Story lives and StreamYard, webinars on StreamYard, Zoom, Google Hangout, talking about our experiences and about the post-COVID world. I'm a firm believer. I remember the first time I spoke about this was on the 22nd of April on a live talk. And, we as entrepreneurs have to focus on the post-COVID world to really get through this stage and keep the end objective in mind to get through this time. And it was really in May that some of the loans we'd applied to started coming into our bank accounts. And we spent really April and May re-engineering our operations for the COVID world and the post-COVID world with our hotel teams. How are we going to look after our guests in this time before a treatment is found, before a vaccination is found, while travel is still limited? And how are we what's going to happen after, this is over, when the world is still emerging from it? So And great news, school admissions still continue to happen, enrollments happened, and we used that time to get our sales suite ready. Construction was still allowed in Portugal, so we continued building on our building projects. Now, I said earlier, Portugal came out quite well in the pandemic. Yes, so there has been a lot of news out there about how Portugal has handled the pandemic and how quickly we went into lockdown, as well as how Portuguese people have behaved. And that's my personal angle to the whole thing, is that people really were disciplined and society was rational and got down to it. Everyone has a grandmother or a grandfather, aunt, uncle. Portuguese society is a very close-knit society, and they did it for the good of the older generation. And there was also definitely, this is a news report from the Telegraph literally a couple of days back, where they pointed to the high level of testing. I was keeping an eye on the high level of testing online in Portugal, but there was even a report on it saying how well they collaborated with the private sector, the private labs here in Portugal, and got their testing level up. So, kudos to the government and society and the private sector and science that they, have actually come out as not just a responsible society, but that they've conducted active testing, and therefore they see the importance of testing. Now, there was also good news emerging about Lisbon and Portugal. Apart from how they handled the pandemic, Knight Frank released a piece of news early May that only 4 cities around the globe expected to see prime price growth in 2020. And they mentioned Lisbon alongside Monaco, Vienna, and Shanghai, even with a mention of 5% capital growth happening during the following year, next year, 2021, which was a great piece of news hitting the internet, really, not the stands. And Portugal continues to be high up. It's always been in the top 5 in the last few years of most peaceful country in the world. And it got ranked again as the 3rd most peaceful country after Iceland and New Zealand. And this is a huge positive for people who consider Portugal as a place to live and work. Peaceful, being it's secure, safe as well, and people are open, tolerant, and liberal as a society. So Forbes also came out with a report that living and retiring overseas post the coronavirus would be great in such and such a country. And number 1 was Portugal's Algarve coast. So Portugal's coming out better and better in international reports, even during the pandemic. These are just some of the articles I've shared. And so Portugal is an amazing place to live and invest. I am just mentioning this again. Why is Portugal trending? If you look at, if you go online and search for Chitra Stern's TEDx talk, you will find my TEDx talk, which is around 14 minutes long, so it's not long for you to watch. And I go through all the reasons why I think Portugal is trending. And I hope you enjoy that, because I really go into details. But this was back in 2017. And right now, I could add a whole other chapter as to why Portugal is a great place to move to. In the last few years, 63,000 tax and residency migrants have moved to the country, representing an investment of over 5 billion euros in the Portuguese economy. And I've this hashtag post-COVID world. There are more and more people relocating to Portugal, but this will be even more in the post-COVID world, as people have had a chance now during this pandemic to reflect on what is really important in life. As far as focusing, being an entrepreneur, I've covered some of the things we've been through, but focusing on what we've done, and apart from acting quick, preparing scenarios, avail of the loans and help from the government. Whatever is out there, go for it and take the help. We need all the help we can get. Keep the cash together, be frugal, look at every bit of cost that's out there, not just re-engineering your product, but re-engineer, the way you do things. Prepare a 3-year runway. I mean, it's not just 6 months you have to get through, but it's going to be 2 to 3 years of hardship. And let's focus on, the planning for 3 years. Be prepared to inject more equity. Those of you who went through the last recession know this. It's cash is king, and be prepared to put more equity into the business. Look, I already said this: re-engineering bits of the business. Get innovative. Look at what people want and need now. Continue to spend on marketing. I know we have to be frugal, but you need business. You need to focus on marketing, and not just marketing and branding, but sales, because it's a very, very tough time, and you need to get some sales in too. These are different activities, as many of you well know. Get into survival mode, think out of the box, and focus on the team. Keep the team together and happy during these tough times. So that's at the end of my presentation. I'm just going to stop sharing, and I'm going to move into back into my room. David, am I back?
Thank you. Yes, you are, and thank you for that. That was a fantastic presentation. I notice as well that we already have questions coming through on the chat. So, for anyone who's watching, the way that I think we'll try and go through this, there's a huge amount of content to cover there from what you were talking about. So I will park the question that we've got from Benedict just for the moment, though I promise we will come to it rather, about being an entrepreneur during this crisis. The first thing that I wanted to ask you, though, was just around this parallel that you've drawn between Portugal and California. Yeah. And you also name-checked Beverly Hills in there. Look, for anyone who's watching, I will unashamedly say that I love Lisbon, right? So I'm probably not going to give you a hard time on that. I can certainly see the attraction of the area in general. But where do you think you've drawn that parallel from? And what lessons might you learn as an area? You are an advisor. You work with entrepreneurs. What can you learn from places like Silicon Valley, and maybe avoid some of the stuff that they've done to make Portugal its own hub and a world-leading center?
Thank you for that question. I mean, obviously, when I started using it back in 2002, we did not have the comparisons, the parallels to Silicon Valley. It had to do a lot with how beautiful the country is, the shape of the country, the amazing coastline it has, and the vibe, the surfy vibe, and those kind of things. But interestingly, things did progress in that direction in more recent years, with the startup ecosystem developing, with Web Summit, Startup Lisbon with its activities, Startup Portugal with their activities. And the government has also encouraged people who want to bring their startup here, that there's a startup visa as well. So a lot has happened in the last 4 years, especially since Web Summit started. So you were here right at the start of that action in 2016 November, David, where the Lisbon being the center of the new startup scene was really happening. Now, they've increased connections as well. We started a direct flight to San Francisco just to have that easy connection for Silicon Valley companies to have a leg in Europe, in Lisbon as well. To help these companies have shared service centers, or to have nearshoring centers for the rest of Europe, for Great Britain as well. So Portugal has been working very hard on this topic of attracting startups, attracting investment. What they also did actually was to simplify the processes of asset management companies to set up here. So to attract private equity, venture capital, a lot of work was also done. Now, America is big, Silicon Valley is big. So when you say avoid the mistakes, I've always seen Portugal as it's small enough, and there's much more room for growth here than there is right now in San Francisco or other places that you might think of being getting to the level of mistakes. But there's no doubt that we've got to look at the future to see what the needs of the people, of the markets out there are, and react. I think one of the great things that Portugal is doing is focusing on the second airport for Lisbon, which is a much needed thing to stop over congestion at its current airport, and that's happening just across the river from the Park of Nations in Montijo. So these are some of the things I can talk about, but I do mention many of these things in my TEDx talk. So I encourage anyone who has time, it's only 14 minutes, do check in on TEDx Chitra Stern. So I talk much more about the incentives, etc. on there.
Just quickly though, you do obviously have a lot of conversations with entrepreneurs in the region. You mentioned there about a foothold for an American company in Europe, but I was doing a talk just last week with a London-based company called Motif,
Right.
and they are based in London and Portugal, and they are far from alone. There are an increasing amount of organisations who have a hub,
100%.
maybe even more than a hub in Lisbon. What is it in conversation with these entrepreneurs that you think is attracting them to the region? Because it's happening in numbers.
I've got to say that, Revolut, there's many, right? I mean, it doesn't come just by magic. Of course, the Portuguese embassy in London, as well as ICEP, the Trade and Investment Board in London, have been working very hard. Portugal, in the special trade mission that special mission task force that I was on, also did a lot of work. And the Ministry of Economy. I mean, so much work has gone into this, David. What is attractive to these foreign companies? I got to say it's the lifestyle, okay? So when you consider the quality of life here, safety, security, climate, it's a temperate climate throughout the year. It's a European city, but with authenticity. It's well connected to the rest of Europe, to across the Atlantic, not just the UK, Ireland, but America. The Americas, the Eastern Seaboard, Brazil. It's got Brazilian connections, obviously through history, but also Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. So we're in a strategic location. We also have a high number of IT graduates coming out of universities here. English is widely spoken. I've always said this is the amazing thing in Portugal. Even when we moved here in 2001, English was already widely spoken here compared to, at that time, certainly to other Southern European countries. And, all these small things have come together to make a big difference. The engineering and IT graduates, science graduates, this makes a big difference for a company seeking to base itself here. And the nice thing about Portugal, small though it is, it has a nice array of engineering subjects and science subjects that graduates focus on and come out of: biotech, artificial intelligence, IT. So, small for the world maybe, but big for us. And I think that's we're taking every bit of business we can take. And these are the things I can say about attractiveness of the ecosystem. And an ecosystem is attractive if you've got a lot happening in it. And that's what I meant with Web Summit. Really gave it a big boost, and then lots of things happened around it as well. So it's
just
great.
Out of interest, you talk there about talent and the engineering graduates.
Yeah.
I suppose there's two ways that you could look at the current crisis, right? COVID could, and we say this with the greatest amount of sensitivity, it could strengthen the hand of a country like Portugal, because someone like me, I work in a job that frankly could be 100% remote. Why live in London where the house prices are ridiculously high and the climate isn't as good if I could go live in Portugal? But at the same time, all of a sudden, a hub doesn't matter in quite the same way. I'm beginning to look at our own business that I work in, and Avinash, and kind of go, well, hang on a minute, a London office and a Birmingham office and a Leeds office or whatever else doesn't really seem to make much sense anymore. So I suppose there's a slight double edge to this, right?
There is, but slight double edge does exist, but think about it. and that's what I said in my presentation. People have had time to reflect about what's really important in their lives now, and the whole hashtag work from home is a reality. People can work from anywhere as long as the internet connections are good, and we have good connections here in Lisbon and in Portugal. High-speed internet is good here. So, why choose to live, wherever it is people live, and suffer, with whatever it is they suffer with commuting, with traveling, etc. And I think this is going to be a big. There's going to be a big change of how people live and work, and Portugal's going to benefit from it. And I don't want to just, obviously it's terrible what's happening with COVID around the world, but I think it's positive that people will reflect and focus on what's important to them in their lives. And Portugal definitely has to gain from that, being the open, tolerant, liberal society that it is. A very welcoming society to foreigners, and I also covered that in my TEDx speech. So I've always said this: I've never felt more welcome in any other place, and the way people embrace you when you arrive here is really great. So huge attraction.
Yeah. Look, I'll just steal Benedict's question and slightly riff on it. So forgive me, Benedict. But Benedict's question is, so how can we be an entrepreneur during COVID-19? And as you were talking, you referenced a couple of articles, and I just got thinking. I read an article in The Guardian, I think it may have been a week or two ago, that was written by someone in Porto as Porto came out of lockdown. And they dreamt about the first day they could go down the cafe and get their espresso and feel the buzz of the city coming back to life. And actually, the reality was slightly different, because they went down to their cafe and only 2 chairs and tables were able to be in the restaurant, and the normal faces that this writer would see weren't there. And he sensed a nervousness. And there were 2 things that were quite interesting that came out of it. First of all, he said, as much as we complain, he missed the tourists, and actually the tourists gave Porto its life. But he also said it was really interesting to see how local businesses were having to adapt. And this is kind of where I'm stealing the entrepreneur piece, because they were talking there about hotels that were pivoting their businesses to attract locals for city breaks and staycations, and trying to think about, if we haven't got foreign travelers coming to the country en masse at the minute, how can we appeal to people who are here and generate new markets? So how can we be an entrepreneur during COVID-19, and what innovations and pivots have you seen that are successfully enabling you to think about how to remain open and be competitive?
Yeah, so I had to sort of reduce my talk to about 20 minutes so that we could have a good chat afterwards.
Apologies.
No, absolutely. So that I did address in my original presentation the pivoting. This is a very important part of being an entrepreneur now, and that's what I meant by be innovative and think out of the box. Now, definitely hotels, will be focusing on a domestic market for now. Because our borders are still closed, and there's a few flights coming in, but you got to have a pretty good reason to arrive at the airport here. You've got to own property, or be on a business that requires you to be here. So domestic travel, definitely, we are focusing on that. But Portugal is a small country, and we had 29 million, passenger arrivals in Lisbon last year, something like that. So let's not underestimate the fact that we've got to, we can't fill all our rooms and days on it. But absolutely, try to do something to attract the local domestic market. Then, as the borders open up, you got to pivot to Spain and France. The good thing is, Portugal has done such a great job on their Can't Skip Hope campaign. There's a hashtag Can't Skip Hope and a hashtag Clean and Safe. They were the first tourist board to come out with this is what we're doing for our hotels, giving them a stamp of cleanliness and safety to help people overcome this fear and then come to us. So, all this helps bring people, as soon as the borders open up, as soon as the airports open up, other nationalities to arrive here. We're working on an air bridge with the UK as well, so that people don't have to go through quarantine when they get back to the UK. But part of the pivoting for me goes beyond thinking national or foreign markets. Wherever we have apartments and houses, we're focusing on the future of medium and long-term stays in Portugal, because I think that COVID, the post-COVID world will be good to Portugal, as we've discussed, why it's so attractive to be here. I really think that the 6-month to 12-month stays will happen much more, also because of these great tax regimes and residence programs that we've got here, the non-habitual residence program and the golden visa. So more people will come and live here for 6 months or more in a year. And more people will find actually investing in a residence program, a real estate residence program after this. So, I think we got to move beyond the sort of short stay market, which we focus a lot on, and move into the serviced apartment world. I mean, and that's what we've got apartments and houses mostly in our inventory. So that's what it is. But Benedict's question is about how to be an entrepreneur. And I think I tried to cover that in my last slide. You've got to be nimble, you've got to be flexible, you've got to be quick, conserve your cash. I mean, this is time and time again. Every recession teaches entrepreneurs that be prepared to inject more equity at every stage. And that's why building up your reserves is very important as an entrepreneur. And I think we, pivoting and innovation is key. Keep thinking outside the box. And that's what I meant with survival mode. As to starting a new business, if that's what his question was, or is it a lady, Benedict, to become an entrepreneur, sure, there are, the world has changed. So change always means new opportunities. And you got to look out there to see what's happening. I mean, everything has changed about the way we behave. So if there are new products to bring out there, definitely now's the time, So good luck, Benedict. And, I think it's actually challenging times doesn't mean they're bad times, There's serious times, definitely people are suffering, but we got to reinvent ourselves and hang on.
Look, just to pick up on some of your language during the presentation and just explore that in a bit more detail, I suppose, because it goes to the heart of being an entrepreneur. You talked about things moving rapidly, which you said you found stressful. You said that you felt quite desperate during April. And I think that a lot of people will have shared those feelings. I think it would be disingenuous of anyone to say that wasn't how they were feeling at this current moment in time, right?
Yeah.
We all know that mental health is a particularly important aspect to look after your life in your life. How have you challenged, or how have you tried to maintain a positive outlook when it is stressful and it is desperate, but you're having to lead businesses?
Yeah, it's extremely difficult in one word. Especially, I mean, we all have members of the family everywhere. We might be isolated, or we might be with 4 kids at home, as I do, all trying to share workspaces and internet connections. So we, how do you, and you've got to be there for your team as well at the same time. You've got to be strong as the CEO and the owner of the business. So it is difficult, but, I've tried to really, continue to do some exercise every day, get a breath of fresh air. I know we were only allowed to walk around the block, the area that we live in with a dog at one point, but we did that every day. We also focused on special moments with the family. We played games when we could, because it was about family unity, but also a break from work. It could just be a half an hour card game, but that's what we had to make time to do. In between, I even watched movies, special movies with them. We watched specific movies that were historical or fun. It could be could be a fun a movie too, but set aside some time for downtime. Very difficult, I know. And meditation, everyone my age especially, we talk about meditation to clear the mind, to bring your thoughts down. Extremely difficult, but there's some great videos on YouTube that I find, Om chanting or, guided meditation, thoroughly recommend them. I mean, if I am able to do that 20-minute life-changing meditation that I do once in a while every day, I'd be an even better person. So, I mean, find the time. And cardiovascular for me is very important. I started using the bike machine that had been sitting around for a couple of years, not being used. I started using it during the lockdown. 20 minutes, if you can, 4 times a week. These are just simple guidelines. You got to find your own zone which gives you peace and relaxation. But
just out of interest, you talked there about kind of family time. I mean, it's a fascinating dynamic. Obviously, your husband is also your business partner. Yeah. Funnily enough, on the podcast I was running Tech Talks, I interviewed someone recently whose business partner is his brother, and they live together. I'm not entirely sure whether husband and wife or that fraternal bond, brothers really can rub each other the wrong way. I suppose you've had to be super careful with regards to drawing that boundary between, right, no, this is family time and work conversation isn't going to creep into it, because I suppose that's hard enough when your business partner isn't related to you, right?
Yeah, it is. And trust me, I've had, I'll be married to my husband and we've been in business together 20 years this year. And it's very, very tough. It's kind of the drawing boundaries, very difficult. And in stressful times, even more difficult, because you're under high stress. I mean, there's no way to disguise that. We have been under extreme high stress these last couple of months. And obviously, you're talking about your life project, and therefore, you can't say, okay, let's try to, not talk about it when there are important things to talk about. But I guess you got to look at the overview. It may not be daily, but there are times when you got to say, okay, I really think we should, not talk about this or touch our phones during dinner conversation. I think you can devise some methods. Again, please don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's easy, and I do not want to sound as though, it's easy at all, because we already went through that, the last recession and the post-recession growth that we had to go through. But one thing I've realized is I'll be turning 50 this year, and definitely different. My body tells me much more now than when I was 30, in my early 30s when I started the business, about the stresses I'm putting it through. So don't wait like me till you're 45 when you start, exercising again, and don't let it all go. That's for sure. I'll be very honest. It's a very important thing to focus on. And I was forced to focus on these things at age 45. And I'll be honest with you, don't wait so long. Try to do that meditation, do yoga, depending on, what you fancy, bike riding, take that little bit of outside time, fresh air, in the green if you can, deep breathing, and set aside time for yourself, even though you're in business with your partner. We're lucky because we have complementary skill sets, but when you're both in business together, you do need your own time as well.
I think the funny thing about this is that whilst obviously you're talking about it from a business leader's point of view, all of what you're saying is entirely relevant to all of us right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're in a white collar job, my office is my home. So actually, it's very easy to let the two bleed into each other, whether you're running the business or not, and actually maintaining those boundaries. So it's fascinating. You mentioned there about exercise. Funnily enough, before I got onto our session, I was running a HIIT class for work. Mainly attended by a number of our furloughed staff.
Yeah.
And your presentation talks about the fact that you've got 260 permanent members of staff out of 300 furloughed. So I just wondered, how have you maintained engagement with those people through this period to make them feel part of the family and the community?
Yeah. This was potentially the toughest thing we had to go through as business owners, because your team is your family, in your company. And I think that caused a lot of the stress, definitely in March and April. But in terms of staying connected with them, definitely WhatsApp groups. I've done a few Zoom sessions. We haven't been able to do it with everyone because you need specific sizes, but certainly it's sort of I've been in touch with most of them through email a few times in this last couple of months, and the leadership team has gotten together over Zoom, even for a drink. Funnily enough, this year is our 10th anniversary, and so we got together for a couple of cocktails. I think we've done about 4 different cocktails for our different teams, because there's the hotel team, but also the real estate team, and we've got the school team. And we, one of the team members brought a bossa nova band last Friday, and we all chilled out listening to live over Zoom bossa nova music and had it together. So you got to find different ways, and obviously there's our HR director is an amazing person. He's just calm in a storm, and he's been a great linchpin. Our general director, our executive team, all of them are great people. And I think at this moment it helps that we're looking forward, and we're starting to open up the hotels again in June. So the furlough was tough, is still tough, because it's April and May mainly, and part of June. But as we start to open up our hotels, and there's more good news coming out, I think it's mentally easier to look forward and say, we're gonna have a season now. It may not be what it was last year, and let's get going. And the other thing I think is to be transparent with everyone. I don't like to lie and say it's going to be great this year, this summer. If we're making a third of our business, last year's business in the hotel business, that's the best case scenario. So I think, don't hide certain things, from your team. Be honest with them, but don't, demotivate them completely either, because it can be tough for people on the team just to hear all the tough news all the time. So I think it's a balanced communication that we have to engage in. The WhatsApp groups, I think we're very lucky to have those now. WhatsApp is a great communication tool, and Zoom to be able to see face to face and, give our face to our teams. Do it definitely if you can. If you're able to connect over Zoom, because that helps people a lot to see the face behind. Email communication is great, but it's pretty one-dimensional.
Look, we've spoken quite a lot about the hotelier and hospitality business, but you also mentioned about education in your presentation, and you talked about the international school and the Microsoft Showcase partnership. Just whilst you touched on it, it would just be really interesting to see how you think education might change. We know that reports have come out suggesting that Cambridge University, so at a higher education level, won't be doing any face-to-face teaching for, I think, the best part of 18 months, certainly till the end of 2021. So, what does that mean for your business? How are you having to think about the way that education looks now as opposed to how it might have done 6 months ago?
Gosh, how things have changed. And I think the ability to be good at online school just got even more important. So we announced that we were going to work together with Microsoft and be tech enabled from the start, but little did we imagine that this would happen and everyone would be doing online school. So we've learned as the investors behind this, we've learned a lot about the online school. Our operator, International School Services, has had to handle this in many of their schools around the world. They have schools around the world, so in China as well. And many of the teachers have had to do this already for the past months, right? So tech-enabled online school is a must. I mean, my kids are doing it through Microsoft Teams, actually, in their own in the school they go to here, and it's worked quite well. The school was a role model because day one they started because they were ready, and I think the preparedness is important, and we are prepared for all these different scenarios, whether it's a pure online scenario in September when we open, or a blended scenario where some kids will be, they take turns. The blended scenarios where they take turns rotating in the classroom. On one day, some of them are in, others are online, and then, so there's a lot of scenario planning going in, and we're completely ready for that. And we're looking at the technology for little kids as well, because one of the areas that kids have struggled, or one of the age, it's the younger kids that struggled more, I think, being doing online schooling. And so we're implementing a specific Moodle, let's call it that, specific online software that will be good for the younger ones in elementary school as well. So no, we've got a professional operator on board, and this helps a lot, to look forward. And being a Microsoft Online Showcase school helps as well, because it's kept us focused from the start on being tech enabled. And I think because we've been envisioning this whole thing as part of an education hub with tech right next door, startups, for kids to be exposed much more to tech startups and entrepreneurship from a young age, we've had to bring in lots of ideas. And we're partnering hopefully with coding schools, and once we kickstart to get kids coding from a young age as well. So I think there's a lot happening. We had to think about it even before the pandemic, but the pandemic's just accelerated all this, as it's done with a lot of other things. So
yeah. Look, technology is obviously something that I promote as much as I can. The whole podcast that I run is obviously all about technology, but at the same time, we promote the responsible use of technology. It's interesting there that you cite younger children. I've got a nephew who's coming up to his second birthday, so he's not quite in school age yet, but because he's been self-isolating with his mum and dad for so long, they went out to a shop for the first time with Tom, and he was a bit nervous of people that he hadn't seen. And obviously, just being with his mum and dad for 3 months had stinted that kind of natural gregarious nature that a toddler's going to have. You mentioned there that youngsters might have struggled a little bit with tech. If you think about the hospitality business and kind of link it to reports that EY have put out there about 50% of businesses looking at automation. To me, luxury holidays are actually all about human contact, and I suppose we've got to be careful, right, that we don't implement too much tech, or we don't race now to automate or to engage with tech where actually it's not necessary.
The interesting thing is leisure travel is predicted not to get as badly hit as business travel is, and I'd have to agree with that. And especially family travel, I think will become even more special for families, because we've had to go through this horrendous time of thinking about what's happening to our older relatives, and grandma, grandpa have not been able to get hugs from their kids. And if I read a Financial Times article, I was the last weekend FT, or can't remember now, interviewing various writers, heads of state, leaders of great global institutions, about what they're looking forward to doing post-pandemic. And you had all these great, Christine Lagarde, Yuval Noah Harari Noah, all saying that they really look forward to being together. They miss their grandchildren or family time. That was a recurring theme throughout the whole discussion, including the editor of the Financial Times. So I think we can automate a lot. We can bring artificial intelligence to a lot of the processes. I'm not saying in the hotel industry, a lot of it. I always said it should be even more automated. Okay, when it comes to checking in, some of the stuff we do could be automated, but the face-to-face and human contact will become even more valuable. Why? Because we've had to go through 2 months without it. And I think that is the one thing that we really, really miss. I mean, you can replace a lot of other things, but being together as a family and being somewhere where you have a smile on the waiter's face. The restaurants have started opening up here, and we went for our first outing the other day to celebrate my son's graduation, we didn't even rush out because, you're all taking it easy step by step. And it was an outdoor space. And it was great to be there, but all the waiters are still in masks, which they will be for some time. But you don't realize how much you rely on that smile from a human being to feel good, right? And so being in hotels, I think it's going to be a tough time. I'm not kidding myself. And tourism is suffering and will suffer, but I think it's definitely that this is one thing you can't replace. I mean, you can do Zoom calls for business meetings, you can travel less for business, organize yourself differently, but you really need that holiday time, downtime with your family to spend that precious time together again. And we're going to value it even more going forward. So that's what we're, thinking. And I think this summer we will see how we do.
Yeah.
Those who can get to us, and I hear it from our guests, they're saying, we can't wait to come back. And there's a single flight, especially the Northern Europeans. They're completely gung ho. The Brits, as soon as it's an air bridge, they'll come over. So,
Are you surprised?
Well, it's great, but as you said earlier, there are two sides to it, and one has to be cautious. But I'm positive into the future.
To jump in, we've probably got time for one more question, and this is something that I wanted to ask. I was told recently that I think in the FTSE 100 there are more CEOs called Dave and Steve than there are CEOs who are women or from ethnic minorities, which is a frankly just shocking stat. If what can we do to try and improve that and encourage more female entrepreneurs? And also in preparing for this session, you said when you allow women to dream, they dream big, and Portugal's actually been able to do that. What do you think Portugal's doing to help promote female leadership in entrepreneurialism as well as in enterprise business?
So Portugal comes out, if you look at the OECD rankings by The Economist, it's called the Glass Ceiling Index. Portugal actually comes out quite well, over and above even the UK or certain other countries, Switzerland, Germany, etc. And looking into the culture and what they do, I think from a young age, all kids, I always say, if you don't stereotype, it helps a great deal. I mean, that's what I feel helped me as a child. And we come from a family of 4 girls and 2 boys. And my parents not stereotyping helped a great deal in, us, reaching great heights in education and career. 3 of us went to Oxbridge, to study, physics and philosophy, law and economics. 3 girls. The other 3 of us, I went to University College London to study engineering, and my 2 brothers, one did economics and the other did math. So there was no kind of boundaries and no stereotypes, and I think that helps a great deal. And I see that here in Portugal. I mean, whether you're a girl or a boy, you got to do well. And Portugal has that traditional kind of like the French system where, you have to do well in your math and your science. And, it's science and math are heavily focused on whether you're a boy or a girl. So, no stereotyping, ambition, in the school system helps. And I think after that, things are formed. I mean, fortunately, unfortunately, that's where it starts at a very young age for a girl to feel confident and, about what she's doing. And then after that, I think in the system itself, there is a lot of, inviting women in tech and, involving, there's a Portuguese Women in Tech. Women in Tech has, the local ambassador, the chapter, as I might call it, Claudia Mendes Silva. And so, all that definitely helps, seeing role models out there. I mean, the head of the Institute of Molecular Medicine is a woman. The head of the NHS, the daily briefings are done by a woman here. That makes a difference. The government is pro-women in the cabinet. There's several ministers and secretaries of state who are amazing here. So it has to come from several levels, in order and parts of society to make this happen. And I think the startup scene as well, TalkDesk, Christina Fonseca is one of the leading exemplar women who did a successful startup here in Portugal, and she's also part of Indico Capital, the female member of the venture capital. So what can I say? I mean, I think that there's a lot of great role models Portugal can speak about. The boundaries are not there in society to say, you got to do this because you're a girl. There is even the second league clubs have female football. Sport is a very important part of getting rid of this gender inequality. And you might think, Southern European country, but they've got female football clubs too. So I know you got me started on something that I could take ages to answer. David. There's so many things, and I'm a big proponent of female entrepreneurship and female leadership. And I think there are several activities and conferences that happen too. That's why we started the Martinello Entrepreneurship event ourselves. So there's a lot happening when you look closely, and that helps, because if people see that these events are happening, and if that's happening in the government, that the female ministers who are competent and really doing a great job, it's got to filter through and make a difference. That would be my answer. To your question.
Look, what are the slight quirks of a main stage at an international conference from your dining room or your front room is that there's no one waving at the side of the stage. But I notice that we're out of time.
Yes, I'm sorry, and I hope I got the feedback from
fault.
the technician that I'm a bit pixelated. I hope you were able to hear me well, at least, even if my image was
your audio is perfect. Don't worry.
Okay,
don't worry.
Thank you. So.
Chitra, thank you so much for your time. Your presentation was fantastic. It was a pleasure of you to give us some time as well to answer some questions.
Thank you.
And thank you to everyone who has watched and joined us on this session today.
David, I got to thank you. It's been a great honor. And, thank you to Women in Tech and Ayumi for involving me. And all the best to all of you out there, male or female.
Cool.
That's right. Sorry.
There we go.
My smile was a bit plastic and then going, is it off? Is it off?